My name is Sarah Chen, and I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern University with a degree in biomedical engineering at 22 years old. I had job offers from 3 major medical device companies, a research position at the university waiting for me if I wanted to pursue my master's degree, and a GPA that had earned me recognition on the dean's list every semester. I should have been on top of the world that warm May evening as my family gathered in our backyard in Evanston to celebrate my graduation. Instead, I was standing in our kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window above the sink, trying to work up the courage to have a conversation I'd been avoiding for 4 years. The backyard was full of relatives, family friends, and neighbors who had watched me grow up. Red and gold decorations, Northwestern's colors, hung from the oak tree my grandfather had planted when my parents first bought this house 30 years ago. My mother, Linda, had spent the entire morning cooking, preparing a feast that combined traditional Chinese dishes with American favorites. The smell of her famous dumplings mixed with the barbecue my dad was grilling, creating the kind of comforting aroma that usually made me feel completely at home. But today was different. Today, I had invited someone special, someone my parents had never met, someone who represented a part of my life I had kept carefully separate from family gatherings, someone who was currently parking her car in front of our house, probably checking her reflection in the rearview mirror and taking the same kind of deep breath I was taking right now. Maya Rodriguez had been my girlfriend for 8 months, though we'd been friends for 2 years before that. We met in our advanced materials science class junior year, initially bonded over late-night study sessions, and a shared frustration with one particularly demanding professor, and gradually fell into something deeper and more meaningful than either of us had expected. Maya was brilliant, double majoring in biomedical engineering and Spanish literature, with dark eyes that lit up when she talked about her research and a laugh that could make me forget whatever I was worried about. The problem wasn't Maya. Maya was perfect. The problem was my family. My parents, David and Linda Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the early 1980s. They had built a successful life in America through hard work, careful planning, and an unwavering focus on traditional values that included very specific expectations about marriage and family. They had sacrificed enormously to give me every opportunity, working multiple jobs to pay for my education, and in return, they expected me to follow a path they could understand and approve of, graduate from college, find a stable career, marry a nice man, preferably Chinese American, but they were willing to be flexible, and give them grandchildren. The fact that I was attracted to women had never been part of their plan. I had known I was gay since I was 15, but I had spent years telling myself it was just a phase, that I would eventually develop feelings for men, that I could make my parents' dreams come true if I just tried hard enough. I dated a few guys in high school and early college, nice guys who deserved better than someone who was essentially going through the motions. It wasn't until I met Maya that I finally admitted to myself that this wasn't something I was going to grow out of. The back door opened, and my younger brother Jason walked into the kitchen. At 19, he was home from his sophomore year at University of Chicago, where he was studying economics, and apparently learning how to be even more sarcastic than he'd been in high school. "Sarah, you're missing your own party," he said, grabbing a soda from the refrigerator. "Mom keeps asking where you are, and Dad's telling everyone about your job offers for the 3rd time." "I'm coming," I said, not moving from the window. Jason studied my face with the perceptiveness that had always made him impossible to lie to. "Okay, what's wrong? You look like you're about to throw up." I turned to face my brother, this person who had been my closest confidant growing up, who had covered for me when I snuck out to go to parties, who had helped me with calculus homework in exchange for rides to soccer practice. If anyone in my family might understand, it would be Jason. "Jay," I said slowly, "what would you say if I told you I was gay?" He blinked once, then shrugged. "I'd say that explains why you never seemed all that interested in any of the guys you dated. Also, why you got so weird whenever Mom started talking about weddings and grandchildren." The casual acceptance in his voice was both a relief and a surprise. You're okay with it? Sarah, you're my sister. You're brilliant. You're kind. You work harder than anyone I know, and you make the best chocolate chip cookies in Illinois. Who you date doesn't change any of that." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But I'm guessing this conversation isn't really about me, is it?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat because I knew exactly who that was. "I invited someone to the party," I said quickly. "Her name is Maya, and she's my girlfriend." Jason's eyebrows rose. And Mom and Dad don't know? They don't know I'm gay. They definitely don't know about Maya. The doorbell rang again, and I could hear my mother's voice calling from the backyard, asking someone to get the door. Sarah, Jason said gently, are you planning to tell them today? I don't know. Maybe. I thought if they met Maya first, if they could see how amazing she is, maybe it would be easier. It was a naive plan, I realized even as I said it. My parents weren't going to suddenly abandon decades of expectations and cultural conditioning just because Maya was wonderful. But I was 22 years old, about to start my career, and I was tired of hiding such an important part of my life. I'll get the door, Jason said. You take a minute to breathe. As he headed toward the front of the house, I heard him mutter, this is going to be interesting. Through the kitchen window, I could see my parents in the backyard. My father was standing by the grill, wearing the apron that said, World's Best Dad, that I had given him for Father's Day when I was 12. He was laughing at something my Uncle Robert had said, completely relaxed and happy. My mother was arranging food on the picnic table, making sure everything looked perfect, pausing occasionally to accept congratulations from guests about my graduation. They looked so proud, so content with the day, and with their daughter's achievements. In a few minutes, that contentment was going to be shattered, and I was going to be the one responsible for shattering it. I heard voices in the front hallway. Jason's voice, warm and welcoming, and Maya's voice, probably a little nervous, but trying not to show it. In a moment, they would walk through the kitchen and out to the backyard, where Maya would meet my parents and extended family for the first time, where I would have to decide whether to introduce her as my friend or find the courage to tell the truth. The kitchen door opened, and Maya walked in, followed by Jason. She was wearing a sundress I'd never seen before, navy blue with small white flowers, and she had clearly spent extra time on her hair and makeup. She looked beautiful and nervous and hopeful all at once. Hi, she said softly, coming over to where I stood by the window. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. Maya had known this day would be difficult. We had talked about it extensively, about the risks and the potential consequences. She had offered to wait, to give me more time to prepare my parents. But I had insisted that I was ready, that it was time to stop living two separate lives. Now, looking at her concerned face, I realized that being ready and being prepared were two very different things. Your brother seems nice, Maya said, glancing at Jason, who was pretending to be very interested in the contents of the refrigerator, but was obviously listening to every word. He is, I managed. Maya, maybe we should... Sarah, my mother's voice called from the backyard. Where are you? Mrs. Kim wants to congratulate you. The moment of decision had arrived. I could introduce Maya as a friend, let her meet my family in the safest possible way, and postpone the truth for another day. Or I could walk out to that backyard, stand in front of everyone who had known me since I was a child, and finally stop hiding who I was. Maya took my hand gently. Whatever you decide, she said quietly. I'm here. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But as I looked at her, at this woman who had brought so much joy and authenticity into my life, I realized that I was tired of not being ready. I was tired of editing my stories, of carefully avoiding pronouns when I talked about my weekend plans with my parents, of feeling like I was living a lie every time I came home. I was Sarah Chen. I had just graduated summa cum laude from one of the best engineering programs in the country. I had job offers and opportunities and a bright future ahead of me, and I was in love with an incredible woman who deserved better than being treated like a secret. Come on, I said, squeezing Maya's hand. Let me introduce you to my family. As we headed toward the back door, I caught Jason's eye. He gave me a small nod of encouragement and what might have been the beginnings of a proud smile. But I had no idea that the conversation waiting for me in the backyard would be far more difficult and painful than I had imagined, or that my father's reaction would force Maya and me to make a choice that would change everything. The backyard was full of the warm chaos of a family celebration. My cousin Amy was chasing her 3-year-old son around the lawn while trying to balance a plate of food. My grandfather was sitting in his favorite lawn chair, holding court with a group of family friends as he told stories about his early days in America. The neighborhood kids had claimed the swing set my parents had refused to take down, even after Jason and I outgrew it, and their laughter mixed with the conversations of adults catching up on work, health, and whose children were getting married next. Maya and I stepped out onto the deck, and I felt her hand squeeze mine slightly before she let go. We had agreed that we would start with introductions, let my parents get to know her a little, and then see how the conversation evolved. Looking back, I realize how naive that plan was, how much I underestimated the weight of years of unspoken expectations and cultural conditioning. My mother spotted us first. Linda Chen was a small woman with an enormous presence, someone who could command a room through sheer force of organization and hospitality. She had spent her entire adult life making sure everyone around her was fed, comfortable, and properly introduced to everyone else. Today, she was in her element, moving between guests with the efficiency of someone orchestrating a complex social symphony. "Sarah," she called out, hurrying over with a plate of food. "There you are. I was wondering." She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed Maya, her hostess instincts immediately taking over. "Oh, hello. You must be one of Sarah's friends from school." "Mom," I said, my voice slightly higher than usual. "This is Maya Rodriguez." "Maya, this is my mother, Linda Chen." Maya stepped forward with a warm smile and extended her hand. "Mrs. Chen, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for including me in Sarah's celebration. Your home is beautiful." My mother shook Maya's hand, and I could see her quickly cataloging details. Maya's appearance, her manner of speaking, the fact that she had brought flowers for the hostess. Maya was making an excellent first impression, which somehow made what I knew was coming even more difficult. "How lovely," my mother said. "Any friend of Sarah's is welcome here. Are you in engineering too?" "I am," Maya replied. "Sarah and I were in several classes together. She's actually the one who helped me get through advanced materials science. I never would have survived that class without her study guides." My mother beamed at this praise of her daughter, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe this would go better than I feared. "Sarah has always been so good at helping others," Mom said proudly. Even as a little girl, she was tutoring other children in math. "Maya, you must try the dumplings. They're made from my grandmother's recipe." As my mother led Maya toward the food table, I noticed my father approaching. David Chen was a quiet man by nature, someone who expressed love through actions rather than words. He had worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood, his day job as an accountant and weekend work doing taxes for other families in the Chinese-American community, to make sure Jason and I had every educational opportunity. He wasn't always comfortable with emotional conversations, but he had never missed a school play, science fair, or graduation ceremony. "Dad," I said as he joined us, "this is my friend Maya Rodriguez. Maya, this is my father, David." Maya shook his hand with the same warmth she had shown my mother. "Mr. Chen, congratulations on raising such an accomplished daughter. You must be so proud of Sarah's achievements." My father's face lit up with the same pride that had been evident all afternoon. "Thank you. Yes, we are very proud. Sarah has worked very hard. Are you also graduating this year?" "I am," Maya said. "I'm actually planning to go to graduate school in the fall. I've been accepted to the bioengineering program here at Northwestern." "Excellent," my father said approvingly. "Education is very important. What do your parents do?" It was a typical question in my family's social circle, the kind of innocent inquiry that helped adults figure out where someone fit in the community hierarchy. But I saw Maya's smile falter slightly, and I remembered what she had told me about her family situation. "My mother is a high school counselor," Maya said carefully, "and my father isn't in the picture anymore." There was a brief moment of awkwardness as my parents processed this information. In their world, intact families were the norm, and they weren't quite sure how to respond to Maya's carefully diplomatic explanation. My mother stepped in smoothly. "Well, your mother must be very proud of your academic success. Teaching is such important work." "She is," Maya said, her smile returning. "She's actually the one who pushed me to apply to Northwestern. She said I shouldn't limit myself just because college would be expensive." This resonated with my parents, who understood the financial sacrifices involved in higher education. I could see them warming to Maya, appreciating her obvious intelligence and respectful manner. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that when I eventually told them the truth about our relationship, they would focus on these positive qualities, rather than their disapproval of my sexuality. We were interrupted by my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, who approached with a beer in his hand, and the slightly too loud voice that indicated he had been sampling the alcohol for a while. "David," he called out, "there's the father of our graduate. You must be so relieved that Sarah finally finished school and can start thinking about getting married and giving you grandchildren." I felt my stomach drop. Uncle Robert was notorious for his inappropriate comments at family gatherings, but this was particularly badly timed. I saw Maya's eyebrows rise slightly, and I knew she was picking up on the family dynamics at play. My father looked embarrassed. "Robert, Sarah just graduated. She has plenty of time to think about marriage." "Plenty of time?" Uncle Robert laughed. "She's 22. When Linda was 22, you two were already engaged. Sarah needs to stop focusing so much on her career and start focusing on finding a good husband." The conversation was spiraling into exactly the kind of traditional gender role discussion that made me uncomfortable under the best of circumstances. With Maya standing right there, listening to my family discuss my future marriage prospects, it felt particularly surreal. "Actually," I said, trying to redirect the conversation, "I'm planning to focus on my career for a while. I have some great job opportunities, and I want to establish myself professionally before I think about other things." Uncle Robert waved this away dismissively. "Career, career, career. That's all you young women think about these days. Sarah, you're a pretty girl from a good family. You won't have any trouble finding a husband. Don't wait too long, though. Men want young wives who will give them healthy children." I could feel heat rising in my cheeks, both from embarrassment and from anger at my uncle's casual sexism. Maya was standing very still beside me, and I could sense her tension even though her expression remained politely neutral. "Uncle Robert," I said firmly, "I think there's more to life than just getting married and having children." "Of course there is," he said, clearly not taking my objection seriously. "But marriage and family are the most important things. Everything else is just extra." That's when my father spoke up, and his words changed everything. "Robert is right about one thing," Dad said, his voice carrying the authority he used when he wanted to end a discussion. "Sarah, you've spent so many years focused on your studies that you haven't paid enough attention to your social life. You're 22 years old, and you've barely dated anyone seriously." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Dad, I've dated a few boys in high school. None of them serious," he continued, clearly warming to his theme. "Your mother and I have been worried that you're too picky, too focused on your books. You need to be more social, more approachable. Men don't want wives who are too independent, too career-focused." The irony of this conversation happening in front of Maya, a woman who was everything my parents claimed to want for me: intelligent, accomplished, kind, and deeply committed to our relationship, was almost too much to bear. "David," my mother said gently, clearly sensing the tension in my posture, "maybe this isn't the best time." But my father was on a roll now, perhaps encouraged by Uncle Robert's nodding approval and the audience of family members who had started to drift over to listen to the conversation. "No, Linda, this is exactly the right time," he said. "Sarah is starting a new chapter in her life, and she needs to be realistic about her priorities. She's a smart girl, but she's also stubborn. She's going to price herself out of the marriage market if she's not careful." I could feel Maya's gaze on me, could sense her watching to see how I would respond to this public discussion of my romantic prospects. This was the moment when I should have spoken up, when I should have said something to defend myself, or at least redirect the conversation away from my supposed deficiencies as a potential wife. Instead, I stood there frozen, watching my father articulate everything I had feared he believed about women, relationships, and what constituted a successful life. "The truth is," my father continued, his voice growing louder as more relatives gathered to listen, "Sarah has always been too focused on competing with men instead of attracting them. She's too argumentative, too independent. She corrects people when they're wrong instead of letting them feel smart. That's not what men want in a wife." Uncle Robert was nodding enthusiastically. "Exactly. Women today don't understand that men want to feel needed, respected. Sarah is a good girl, but she's going to have to learn to be more feminine if she wants to get married." I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. Here were the men in my family, discussing my personality flaws and romantic prospects, as if I weren't standing right there, as if Maya weren't witnessing this entire degrading analysis of my worth as a potential wife. "She's also getting older," Uncle Robert added helpfully. 22 isn't that young anymore. If she waits much longer, all the good men will be taken, and she'll be left with the leftovers." That's when my father delivered the blow that would define the rest of the evening. "Honestly," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now quiet backyard, "if Sarah doesn't start making some changes, no man is ever going to want her." The silence that followed was absolute. I stood there, feeling as if I had been physically slapped, trying to process the fact that my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, helped me with math homework, and told me I could be anything I wanted to be, had just declared in front of our entire extended family that I was fundamentally unlovable. Maya stepped closer to me, and I could feel the warmth of her presence even though I couldn't look at her. I was too humiliated, too shocked by the casual cruelty of what had just happened. My mother looked stricken. "David, that's enough," but the damage was done. In one sentence, my father had reduced all of my accomplishments, all of my hard work and academic success, to nothing. According to him, none of it mattered because I had failed at the only thing that really counted, making myself appealing to men. I finally found my voice, though it came out smaller and shakier than I intended. "Dad, I can't believe you just said that." He looked genuinely surprised by my reaction. "Sarah, I'm trying to help you. You're a smart girl, but you need to be realistic about relationships. Men want wives who will support them, not compete with them." That's when Maya did something that changed everything. She stepped forward, placed her hand gently on my arm, and said in a clear, strong voice that carried across the silent backyard, "Mr. Chen, with all due respect, I think you're wrong about your daughter." Every eye in the backyard turned to Maya, this young woman who had been quietly observing our family dynamics and had now decided to insert herself into what was clearly a deeply personal conversation. "Maya," I said quietly, "you don't have to," but she was already speaking, her voice calm but determined. "Sarah is one of the most incredible people I've ever met. She's brilliant, she's kind, she's dedicated to helping others, and she has more integrity than anyone I know. Any person would be lucky to be loved by her." The emphasis on the word person was subtle but unmistakable. I felt my heart stop as I realized what Maya was about to do. "In fact," she continued, looking directly at my father, "someone already is." And then, in front of my parents, my extended family, the neighbors, and everyone who had gathered to celebrate my graduation, Maya turned to me and kissed me. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like time had stopped entirely. Maya's lips were soft and warm against mine, and for just a moment, all the anxiety and fear disappeared. In that brief instant, there was only love and support and the courage that comes from knowing someone believes in you completely. When we separated, the silence in the backyard was deafening. I could hear a neighbor's dog barking in the distance, the hum of the air conditioning unit on the side of the house, and what sounded like a car door slamming somewhere down the street. But from the 40-plus people gathered in our backyard, there wasn't a single sound. Maya kept her hand on my arm, a steady anchor in what felt like a surreal moment. I looked at her face and saw determination mixed with concern. She was clearly worried about how I was handling this very public revelation, but she wasn't backing down. I turned to look at my parents, and what I saw in their faces made my stomach drop even further than it already had. My mother looked shocked, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with what appeared to be a mixture of surprise and dawning understanding. My father's expression was harder to read. Confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like anger were all competing for dominance. The first person to break the silence was Uncle Robert, who apparently had been too drunk to fully process what had just happened. "Wait," he said loudly. Are you two?" He gestured vaguely between Maya and me, his beer-fogged brain clearly struggling to catch up with the situation. Before I could figure out how to respond, my 3-year-old cousin Tommy broke away from his mother and ran over to us. "Sarah," he announced cheerfully, completely oblivious to the tension surrounding him. "Who's your friend? Is she staying for cake?" The innocent question from a child somehow made the moment even more surreal. Here was Tommy, who didn't understand anything about sexuality or social expectations, just curious about the new person at his cousin's party. His simple acceptance highlighted just how complicated adults had made something that could be straightforward and natural. "Tommy," his mother Amy called out nervously. "Come back here, sweetie." But Tommy was already tugging on Maya's dress. "What's your name?" he asked, with the directness that only small children possess. Maya knelt down to his level, her smile genuine despite the chaos of the moment. "My name is Maya," she said gently. I'm Sarah's girlfriend." The word hung in the air like a declaration. There was no taking it back now, no pretending this was all a misunderstanding or a joke gone wrong. Maya had used the word that made our relationship undeniably clear to everyone present. Tommy considered this information with the seriousness of someone processing new data. "Like how Mommy is Daddy's girlfriend?" "Something like that," Maya said softly. "Cool," Tommy said, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Are you gonna live in Sarah's house now?" Before Maya could answer, my father found his voice. "Sarah, he said, and I could hear the controlled anger underneath the calm tone. I think we need to talk. Inside. Now. My mother was still standing frozen, her hand over her mouth, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I couldn't tell if they were tears of shock, disappointment, or something else entirely. David, she said quietly, maybe we should… Inside, my father repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. All of us. I looked around the backyard at the faces of my extended family and friends. Some people looked curious, others uncomfortable. My grandfather was sitting in his lawn chair, looking confused but not unkind. Cousin Amy was trying to distract Tommy while clearly straining to hear every word of what was happening. The neighbors who had known me since I was a child were exchanging glances that ranged from supportive to disapproving. Maya, I said quietly, maybe you should… I'm not leaving, she said firmly. We're in this together. The solidarity in her voice gave me strength, but I was also terrified of what my father might say to her, what kind of scene was about to unfold in our living room. Jason appeared at my side as if from nowhere. Dad, he said carefully, maybe everyone should just take a breath here. Jason, this doesn't concern you, my father said sharply. Actually, it does, Jason replied, his voice steadier than I felt. Sarah is my sister, and Maya is her guest. This is supposed to be a celebration, not an interrogation. I had never loved my brother more than I did in that moment. He was putting himself between me and my father's anger, trying to de-escalate a situation that was spiraling out of control. But my father was beyond reasoning. Inside, he said again, this time directed at all four of us. Now, as we walked toward the house, I was acutely aware of the conversation starting up behind us. I could hear whispered discussions in both English and Chinese, people trying to process what they had just witnessed and figure out what it meant for the family dynamics they thought they understood. The living room felt cramped and airless with the four of us standing there. My father closed the door behind us and immediately turned to face Maya and me. What, he said slowly, is going on here? I took a deep breath, knowing that there was no going back now. Dad, Maya is my girlfriend. We've been together for 8 months. My mother sank into the armchair by the window, looking like she needed the physical support. Sarah, she said softly, I don't understand. You dated boys in high school. I tried to date boys, I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. I tried because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But I'm gay, Mom. I've known since I was 15, and I've been trying to find the courage to tell you. My father's face was getting redder by the minute. This is ridiculous, he said. You're confused. You've been spending too much time around the wrong people, and now you think… I'm not confused, Dad, I interrupted. I'm gay. This isn't something that happened to me, or something I chose. It's who I am. No, he said firmly. This is not who you are. This is some phase, some rebellion against the values your mother and I taught you. Maya stepped closer to me, and I could feel her preparing to speak. I knew I should warn her that engaging with my father when he was like this was probably not going to end well, but I was too overwhelmed to think clearly. Mr. Chen, Maya said respectfully, I understand this is a shock, but Sarah isn't rebelling against anything. She's just being honest about who she is and what makes her happy. My father turned his full attention to Maya for the first time since we'd come inside. And you, he said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. You think you can come into my house, into my family's celebration, and corrupt my daughter? The word corrupt hit like a physical blow. I saw Maya flinch, saw her carefully maintained composure crack slightly. I love your daughter, Maya said quietly. I haven't corrupted anyone. Sarah was already… Love? My father interrupted. You don't know what love is. This thing between you two isn't love. It's confusion, experimentation, a phase that will pass when Sarah meets the right man. David, my mother said from her chair, her voice barely audible. Please stop. But he was beyond stopping. Years of unexamined prejudice and cultural conditioning were pouring out, and I was seeing a side of my father I had never witnessed before. No, Linda, he said. This needs to be said. Sarah, you are throwing away your future for this fantasy. You think this relationship is going to last? You think this girl is going to stand by you when things get difficult? When you realize you want children, a real family? We can have children, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. Gay couples have children all the time. My father laughed, but there was no humor in it. Children need a mother and a father. They need a normal family structure. What you're describing isn't a family. It's an experiment that will damage any children involved. I felt Maya's hand find mine, and I squeezed it tightly. Dad, there are thousands of happy, healthy children being raised by same-sex couples. The research shows. I don't care what some liberal research says, he snapped. I care about reality, and the reality is that you are destroying your life and embarrassing this family. The word embarrassing stung more than I expected. I realized that part of what was driving my father's anger wasn't just disapproval of my sexuality. It was concern about what other people would think, how this would reflect on him and my mother in their community. So this is about you, I said, anger finally beginning to replace the hurt and confusion. This is about how you'll look to your friends, not about what makes me happy. This is about what's right, he said firmly. This is about the values we raised you with, the respect you owe to your family, and the responsibility you have to carry on our traditions. Jason, who had been standing quietly by the door, finally spoke up. Dad, what traditions exactly? The tradition of loving and supporting your children, because that's the only tradition I care about right now. My father turned his anger toward his son. Jason, you're 19 years old. You don't understand the complexities of family responsibility or cultural expectations. I understand that Sarah is my sister and she deserves our support, Jason replied. I understand that Maya makes her happy in a way I've never seen before, and I understand that the way you're treating them right now is wrong. The solidarity from my brother was overwhelming. I had expected him to be supportive, but I hadn't expected him to take on our father so directly. Both of you are being influenced by modern liberal thinking, my father said dismissively. You don't understand the importance of traditional family values, of maintaining cultural integrity. What culture, Dad? I asked. The culture that says women should be subordinate to men? The culture that says my worth is determined by whether I can find a husband? Because if that's the culture you want me to maintain, then maybe it's time for it to change. The comment hit home. I could see in my father's face that he remembered what he had said in the backyard, the casual dismissal of my worth that had started this entire confrontation. I was trying to help you, he said, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried before. I was trying to give you realistic advice about relationships. By telling everyone that no man would ever want me? I asked. By reducing all of my accomplishments to nothing because I haven't found a husband yet? My mother finally spoke up from her chair. David, did you really say that? He looked uncomfortable for the first time since we'd come inside. I was trying to motivate her to be more social, more approachable. By humiliating her in front of the entire family? Maya asked, her voice carrying a controlled anger that I had never heard before. By making her feel like her education and career and kindness don't matter because she doesn't fit your definition of what a woman should be. My father turned back to Maya with renewed hostility. You have no right to comment on how I raise my daughter or what I expect from her. I have every right, Maya replied firmly, because I love her, because I see her worth every single day, and I'm not going to stand here and listen to you tear her down. The confrontation had reached a boiling point. My father was furious at being challenged by someone he saw as an outsider. Maya was protective and angry, and I was caught in the middle, trying to process the fact that my worst fears about coming out to my family were all coming true at once. That's when my mother surprised everyone. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through the argument with unexpected authority. All of you, just stop. We all turned to look at her. She had been so quiet since we came inside that I had almost forgotten she was there. Linda, my father began. We need to... No, David, she said firmly. We need to listen. We need to stop talking and listen to what our daughter is trying to tell us. She stood up from her chair and walked over to where Maya and I were standing. Up close, I could see that she had been crying, but her expression was thoughtful rather than devastated. Sarah, she said softly, are you happy? The question was so simple, so different from everything else that had been said in the past few minutes, that it caught me completely off guard. What? I asked. Are you happy? She repeated. With Maya, with this relationship, with who you are you happy? I looked at Maya, at this incredible woman who had just stood up to my father's anger to defend me, who had risked her own comfort and safety to support me in the most difficult moment of my life. Yes, I said, and as soon as I said it, I realized how true it was. Yes, I'm happier than I've ever been. My mother nodded slowly, as if she was processing this information and trying to figure out what it meant. Then maybe, she said quietly, looking at my father, that's what matters most. The room fell silent again, But this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of people trying to figure out how to move forward, how to rebuild a conversation that had gone so badly wrong. But before anyone could figure out what to say next, the living room door opened, and Uncle Robert stumbled in, clearly having consumed several more beers since we'd left the backyard. "So," he announced loudly, "are we having a family meeting about Sarah's lesbian phase or what?" Uncle Robert's intrusion shattered whatever fragile progress my mother's question had created. The way he said lesbian phase, with a combination of mockery and dismissal, made it clear that the backyard conversations had not been moving in a supportive direction. "Robert," my father said sharply, "get out." "Oh, come on, David," Uncle Robert replied, swaying slightly in the doorway. "This affects the whole family. We need to talk about how to handle this situation." He gestured vaguely at Maya and me, as if we were a problem to be solved rather than people to be understood. "There's nothing to handle," Jason said firmly. "This is a private family conversation." "Private?" Uncle Robert laughed. "Sarah made it pretty public when she had her little girlfriend kiss her in front of everyone. The neighbors are all talking about it. Mrs. Kim asked me if we knew Sarah was, you know." He made a vague gesture that was presumably meant to indicate my sexuality. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. The idea that my personal life was already becoming neighborhood gossip was mortifying. But what was worse was the casual way my uncle was treating something so important to me. "Uncle Robert," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this isn't a phase, and it's not something that needs to be handled. This is who I am." "Sweetie," he said, his tone becoming condescendingly paternal, "you're 22 years old. You don't know who you are yet. When I was your age, I thought I wanted to be a rock star. People go through phases. This lesbian thing is just college experimentation that went on too long." Maya stepped forward, and I could see she had reached the limit of her patience with my family's dismissive attitudes. "Mr. she began, then realized she didn't know his name. "Robert Chen," he supplied helpfully. "David's younger and better-looking brother." "Mr. Chen," Maya said, her voice controlled but cold. "I'm not experimentation. Our relationship isn't a phase, and your niece doesn't need your approval or understanding to live her life authentically." Uncle Robert looked Maya up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know, you're a pretty girl," he said. "What happened to make you think you don't like men? Bad relationship? Daddy issues?" The casual sexualization and stereotyping in his comment was breathtaking. I saw Maya's jaw clench, and I knew she was fighting the urge to say something that would make this situation even worse. "That's enough," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "Uncle Robert, you're drunk. You're being incredibly rude and you need to leave." "I'm being honest," he replied. "Someone in this family needs to be honest about what's happening here. You're throwing away your future because you're confused about sex. This girl," he pointed at Maya, "she's taking advantage of your confusion." "I'm taking advantage?" Maya asked, her voice rising slightly. "By supporting Sarah's education? By encouraging her career goals? By treating her with respect and love? By convincing her she's something she's not?" Uncle Robert replied. "By making her think this lifestyle is normal or healthy." My father, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Robert, that's enough. Go back outside." "David, you can't just ignore this," Uncle Robert insisted. "The whole family is talking about it. Cousin Mary asked me if we're going to pretend this is normal. Aunt Susan wants to know if we should still invite Sarah to family events if she's going to bring her friend." The word friend was delivered with such disdain that it was somehow worse than if he had used a slur. The idea that my extended family was already discussing whether I was still welcome at family gatherings was devastating. "They're talking about disinviting me?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable for the first time since he'd entered the room. "Well, not disinviting exactly, but some of the older relatives are concerned about, you know, the influence on the younger kids. They don't want the children thinking this is normal." "What influence?" Jason asked angrily. "The influence of seeing two people who love each other? The influence of watching someone be honest about who they are? The influence of thinking this lifestyle is acceptable?" Uncle Robert replied. "Children are impressionable. They need to see normal relationships, normal families." Maya had been quiet during this exchange, but I could see her processing every word, cataloging every insult and dismissal. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but deadly serious. "Mr. Chen," she said, "I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Your niece is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. She graduated summa cum laude from one of the best engineering programs in the country. She has job offers from companies that would consider themselves lucky to have her. She volunteers her time teaching CPR to teenagers and tutoring children in math. She's kind, intelligent, hardworking, and more ethical than most people I know. Uncle Robert opened his mouth to interrupt, but Maya held up her hand. I'm not finished, she continued. Sarah is all of those things, and she also happens to be gay. Her sexuality doesn't diminish any of her other qualities. It doesn't make her less worthy of your family's love and support, and it certainly doesn't make our relationship less valid than any heterosexual couple you would welcome with open arms. She paused, looking around the room at my parents, my brother, and my uncle. The only thing that's abnormal in this situation is the way some of you are treating someone you claim to love simply because she doesn't fit your narrow definition of what a woman should be. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Uncle Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't quite figure out how to respond to Maya's calm, factual presentation of who I was and what I had accomplished. My mother was the first to speak. Maya is right, she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Maya is right, she repeated, her voice growing stronger. Sarah is remarkable. She always has been. She was the child who spent hours helping her grandfather with his English when he moved in with us. She was the teenager who tutored her classmates for free because she wanted everyone to succeed. She was the college student who called home every week to check on us even when she was overwhelmed with her own studies. My mother walked over to where I stood and took my hands in hers. I don't understand this, she said honestly. I don't understand how you knew you were gay, or what it feels like to be attracted to women. I don't know how to explain this to my friends or what to say to relatives who ask questions. I felt my heart breaking a little, but my mother wasn't finished. But I understand that you're still my daughter. I understand that Maya makes you smile in a way I haven't seen in years. And I understand that the way some people in this family are treating you right now is wrong. She turned to look at Uncle Robert. Robert, you're drunk, and you're being cruel. Whatever questions the family has, whatever concerns people might have, this is not how we handle them. This is not how we treat people we love. Uncle Robert looked genuinely surprised by his sister-in-law's defense of me. Linda, you can't be serious. You can't be okay with this. I'm not okay with my daughter being afraid to tell me the truth for 4 years, my mother replied. I'm not okay with her feeling like she had to hide such an important part of her life, and I'm definitely not okay with family members making her feel unwelcome in her own home. My father had been quiet during my mother's speech, but now he spoke up. Linda, we can't just ignore the cultural implications. What cultural implications, David? My mother interrupted. The implication that we raised a daughter who is honest, hardworking, and capable of love? The implication that we succeeded in creating a person who stands up for what she believes in? She gestured toward Maya. This young woman just spent 10 minutes defending our daughter against members of our own family. She sees Sarah's worth clearly and supports her dreams completely. If that's not what we want for our children, then maybe our priorities are wrong. I had never heard my mother speak so directly to my father, especially not in front of other people. She was usually the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and kept family harmony. But something about this situation had awakened a protective instinct that overrode her usual diplomatic approach. But what will people think? My father asked, and for the first time, he sounded uncertain, rather than angry. Which people? My mother asked. The people who love Sarah and want her to be happy? Those people will be fine. The people who judge our family based on gossip and assumptions? Why do we care what they think? Jason stepped closer to our parents. Mom's right, Dad. The people who matter will support Sarah. The people who don't support her, maybe they don't matter as much as we thought they did. Uncle Robert was looking increasingly uncomfortable as the family consensus shifted away from his position. You're all making a mistake, he said. This is going to tear the family apart. The older generation will never accept this. Then maybe, I said, finding my voice again. It's time for some things to change. I looked around the room at my family. My mother, who was clearly struggling but trying to be supportive. My father, who looked confused and conflicted. My brother, who had been solidly in my corner from the beginning. And my uncle, who represented the attitudes I had feared encountering. I spent 4 years hiding who I am because I was afraid of this exact conversation, I continued. I was afraid that being gay would make me less valuable to this family, that it would overshadow everything else about me, and maybe for some people it will. But I can't keep living my life trying to be someone I'm not just to make other people comfortable. I squeezed Maya's hand, drawing strength from her presence. Maya and I aren't asking anyone to understand everything immediately. We're not asking you to change your deeply held beliefs overnight. But we are asking to be treated with basic respect and kindness. We're asking to be seen as people who love each other, not as a problem to be solved or a phase to be endured. My father was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing everything that had been said. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. Sarah, I'm not ready to say I understand all of this. I'm not ready to say I'm comfortable with it, but I don't want to lose my daughter over it either. It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it was the first acknowledgement he'd made that our relationship might continue despite this revelation. I felt a flicker of hope. You don't have to understand it right away, Dad, I said. You just have to accept that this is who I am, and that Maya is important to me. Uncle Robert made one last attempt to change the direction of the conversation. David, think about what this means for the family reputation. Think about what people at the cultural center will say. But my father surprised me by shaking his head. Robert, go home. Sleep off the alcohol and think about whether you want to be the kind of person who makes his niece feel unwelcome in her own family. Uncle Robert looked around the room, clearly realizing that he had lost this battle. With a dismissive gesture, he stumbled back toward the door. You're all making a mistake, he said. But fine. Don't say I didn't warn you when this all blows up in your faces. The door slammed behind him, leaving the four of us standing in the sudden quiet of the living room. I could hear the muffled sounds of the party continuing outside. People talking, children playing, the normal sounds of a family celebration that felt surreal given what had just transpired. Maya was still holding my hand, and I realized that she had been my anchor through this entire confrontation. Every time I felt like I might crumble under the weight of my family's reactions, her steady presence had reminded me that I wasn't alone. My mother sat back down in her chair, looking exhausted. So what happens now? She asked. It was such a practical question, so typical of my mother's approach to difficult situations. She processed emotions by figuring out next steps, by creating plans that made sense of chaos. Now we figure it out, I said. We take it one day at a time, and we figure out how to be a family that includes this new information. Will you? My father began, then stopped. He looked uncomfortable, but he was clearly trying to find words for something important. Will you still come to family dinners? Will you bring Maya? The question was hesitant, uncertain, but it was also an invitation. He was asking whether Maya and I saw a future with this family, whether we were willing to do the work of rebuilding relationships that had been damaged by years of hiding and misunderstanding. I looked at Maya, who gave me a small nod of encouragement. If we're welcome? I said. Yes, we'd like that. You're welcome, my mother said firmly. Maya, you're welcome here. I hope you'll be patient with us while we learn how to do this better. Maya smiled for the first time since we'd come inside. Mrs. Chen, I appreciate that more than you know. I never wanted to cause problems for your family. I just wanted to support Sarah. You did support her, Jason said. You stood up for her when she needed it most. That's what family is supposed to do. My father looked at Jason with something that might have been pride. When did you become so wise? He asked. I learned from watching Sarah, Jason replied. She taught me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. We stood there for a moment, all of us processing what had just happened, what it meant for our relationships going forward. It wasn't a perfect resolution. My father was still clearly struggling with his feelings about my sexuality, and I knew there would be difficult conversations ahead with extended family members, but it was a beginning. Should we go back outside? My mother asked. People are probably wondering where we went. I thought about facing the backyard full of relatives and family friends, about dealing with questions and stares and whispered conversations. A few hours ago, the idea would have terrified me. Now, with Maya beside me and my immediate family showing tentative support, it felt manageable. Let's go back outside, I said. It's my graduation party after all. Walking back into the backyard felt like entering a different world. The party was still going on. Children were still playing on the swing set. Adults were still clustered around tables with plates of food. But I could sense the underlying current of curiosity and tension that my uncle's drunken announcement had created. Conversations quieted slightly as Maya and I appeared, then resumed at a volume that suggested people were trying very hard to appear normal, while desperately wanting to know what had happened inside the house. My grandmother was sitting with a group of her elderly friends, and I could see them glancing in my direction with expressions that ranged from confused to concerned. Sarah! Tommy ran over to us again, apparently the only person at the party who was completely unaffected by the drama. Did you have your meeting? Are you going to eat cake now? The innocence in his voice was a relief after the intensity of the living room confrontation. Maya knelt down to his level again, and I watched as she answered his questions with the same patience and kindness she had shown throughout this entire difficult day. "Yes, we had our meeting," she told him. "And yes, I think it's definitely time for cake." As we moved toward the dessert table, I noticed that people's reactions to us were varied. Some family friends approached us with warm smiles and congratulations on my graduation, making a point of including Maya in their conversations. Others kept their distance, clearly uncertain about how to navigate this new social situation. My cousin Amy approached us hesitantly, glancing around to make sure her husband wasn't within earshot. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I wanted to say, I'm sorry about some of the things that were said out here. Not everyone feels that way." I appreciated her attempt to be supportive, even if she seemed nervous about making the gesture too public. "Thank you, Amy," I said. "That means a lot." "Maya," she continued, "I'm sorry we didn't get to talk more earlier. Tommy seems to really like you." Maya smiled. "He's a sweet kid. You should be proud." As Amy moved away, I noticed my grandfather making his way over to us. At 82, he moved slowly but with purpose, using the cane that he claimed was just for show, but clearly relied on more than he admitted. "Sarah," he said in Mandarin, then switched to his careful English. "Come sit with me." My grandfather's English was limited but deliberate. He had learned it later in life and used it sparingly, usually reverting to Mandarin for important conversations. The fact that he was speaking English suggested he wanted Maya to understand what he was saying. We followed him to his favorite lawn chair, and he gestured for us to sit on the nearby bench. "In China," he began slowly, "when I was a young man, many things were not allowed to discuss. People had to hide many parts of life. I wasn't sure where this was going, and I felt nervous about what my grandfather might say. He represented the oldest generation in our family, the one most likely to hold traditional views about sexuality and relationships. When I come to America," he continued, "I learned that here, people can speak truth about their lives. This is a good thing about America. Truth is better than hiding." He looked at Maya, studying her face with the careful attention he gave to important matters. "You make my granddaughter happy?" he asked her directly. "Yes, sir," Maya replied. "I try to. Every day." He nodded slowly. "Good. Sarah worked very hard her whole life. She deserved to be happy." Then he did something that surprised everyone within earshot. He smiled and patted Maya's hand gently. "You take care of each other," he said. "Family is who loves you. Rest is just, how do you say, details." I felt tears forming in my eyes. My grandfather's acceptance, delivered in his careful English, meant more to me than I could express. Here was the person in our family most likely to disapprove, and instead, he was offering his blessing. "Thank you, grandfather," I said in Mandarin. He waved his hand dismissively, as if profound acceptance of his gay granddaughter was nothing unusual. "Go eat cake," he said. "Celebrate. You work hard for this day." As we walked away from my grandfather, I felt Maya squeeze my hand. "Your grandfather is wonderful," she said softly. "He is," I agreed. I should have known he'd surprise me. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly than I had dared to hope. While some relatives remained distant and uncomfortable, others made genuine efforts to include Maya in conversations and get to know her as a person, rather than as a symbol of my sexuality. My mother spent considerable time introducing Maya to family friends, speaking about her academic achievements and career plans with obvious pride. My father remained somewhat reserved, but I noticed him watching Maya throughout the evening, observing how she interacted with different family members, how she helped my mother clear tables without being asked, how she listened patiently to my grandfather's stories about his early days in America. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself helping my mother pack up leftover food, while Maya assisted my father with folding chairs and cleaning up the backyard. "She's a good person," my mother said quietly, as we wrapped dumplings in aluminum foil. "She is," I agreed. "I can see why you love her," Mom continued. "She stood up for you today when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That takes character." I looked over at Maya, who was carefully stacking chairs while listening to my father explain something about the proper way to store outdoor furniture for maximum longevity. She was nodding attentively, treating his instructions with the same respect she had shown all day, despite the fact that he had been less than welcoming earlier. "Mom," I said, "I know this is a lot to process. I know it's not what you expected for me." My mother paused in her food packing activities and looked at me directly. "Sarah, do you know what I expected for you?" I thought about all the conversations over the years, all the hints about marriage and grandchildren, all the assumptions about the life I would build. I expected you to find someone who would love you completely, support your dreams, and treat you with kindness and respect, she said. I expected you to build a partnership with someone who saw your worth and celebrated your achievements. I expected you to be happy. She gestured toward Maya, who was now helping my father move the grill back into the garage. Looking at how Maya defended you today, how she supports your goals, how she treats our family with respect even after some of us were unkind to her. It seems like you found exactly what I hoped you would find. The details of gender and sexuality. Those are things I need to learn about and understand better. But the important things, the things that matter for a good partnership, those are already there. I hugged my mother tightly, overwhelmed by her willingness to prioritize my happiness over her own expectations and assumptions. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for trying to understand. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell the truth, she replied. I'm sorry it took so long, and I'm sorry it was so difficult. As Maya and I prepared to leave that evening, my father approached us at the front door. He looked uncomfortable, but determined, like someone who had been practicing what he wanted to say. Maya, he said formally, I owe you an apology. I said some things today that were unkind and unfair. You handled yourself with dignity, even when others in this family did not. Maya looked surprised by his directness. Mr. Chen, I understand this was a difficult day for everyone. That doesn't excuse poor behavior, he replied. You are clearly important to my daughter, and that makes you important to this family. I hope you'll give us another chance to show you proper hospitality. It wasn't a full embrace of my sexuality or our relationship, but it was a genuine apology and an invitation to keep building bridges. For someone as private and traditional as my father, it represented significant progress. I'd like that very much, Maya said. Thank you. As we drove home that night, Maya and I finally had our first quiet moment to process everything that had happened. That was, I began, then trailed off, not sure how to summarize the emotional roller coaster of the day. Intense, Maya finished, but not as bad as it could have been. Your mom and brother were amazing. Your grandfather was wonderful. And your dad, I think he's going to come around. What about Uncle Robert and some of the others? Maya shrugged. Some people take longer to evolve. Some people never do. But the people who matter most in your family are trying. And that's what counts. I thought about that as we drove through the quiet streets of Evanston. Maya was right. The people whose opinions mattered most had ultimately chosen love and acceptance over prejudice and tradition. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't immediate, and it wasn't complete, but it was enough to build on. Maya, I said as we pulled into her apartment complex, thank you for today, for standing up to my father, for being patient with my family, for kissing me in front of everyone when I was too scared to speak up for myself. She turned to face me in the passenger seat. Sarah, that's what you do when you love someone. You show up, you speak the truth, and you stand together no matter what. 6 months later, I was sitting in the emergency room break area at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where I had started my job as a biomedical engineer specializing in medical device integration. Maya was finishing her shift as a resident in the same emergency department, and we had developed a routine of meeting for coffee during her breaks when our schedules aligned. I was reviewing technical specifications for a new patient monitoring system when Maya collapsed into the chair across from me, looking exhausted but satisfied in the way that came from a successful shift in emergency medicine. How was your day? She asked, stealing a sip of my coffee before I could offer it. Good, I said, closing my laptop. I got approval for the cardiac monitor upgrade project, so I'll be working directly with Dr. Martinez's cardiology team next month. That's fantastic, Maya said, her tired face lighting up with genuine excitement for my achievements. I knew they'd recognize your expertise eventually. 6 months of working in the same hospital had given us both a deep appreciation for each other's professional abilities. Maya had quickly earned a reputation as one of the most competent and compassionate residents in the emergency department, while my work on improving medical devices had already resulted in measurable improvements in patient care efficiency. How are things with your family? Maya asked. It had become a regular check-in question, as we both navigated the ongoing process of integrating our relationship into my family dynamics. Better, I said honestly. Mom called yesterday to invite us to Jason's birthday dinner next weekend. She specifically asked me to make sure you could come. My mother had indeed become one of Maya's strongest supporters in the family. After that difficult graduation day, she had made genuine efforts to understand my sexuality, reading books, asking thoughtful questions, and gradually becoming comfortable with discussing our relationship openly. She now referred to Maya as her daughter-in-law in all but legal status, and had started making pointed comments about marriage equality that would have shocked me a year ago. "And your dad?" Maya asked. "Still working on it," I admitted. "But he asked me about your research project last week. He actually seemed interested in the technical details. My father's evolution had been slower but steady. He had never apologized for his initial reaction or explicitly stated his acceptance of my sexuality, but his actions had gradually shifted. He included Maya in family photos, saved articles about LGBTQ+ rights to share with me, and had started making an effort to learn about her Mexican heritage, even attempting to cook some traditional dishes for family dinners. What about the extended family situation? This remained the most complicated aspect of our family integration. Uncle Robert had indeed influenced some of the older relatives, and several had made it clear that while they wouldn't actively exclude me from family events, they also wouldn't acknowledge or accept my relationship with Maya. Family gatherings had become exercises in navigation, figuring out which relatives were supportive, which were neutral, and which were best avoided. "Mixed," I said. "Cousin Amy invited us to Tommy's 4th birthday party next month, and she specifically mentioned that Tommy has been telling everyone at preschool that his cousin Sarah has a girlfriend, and that's totally normal." Maya laughed. "That kid is going to grow up with such a healthy perspective on relationships. But Aunt Susan made it clear that we're not welcome at her daughter's wedding next year," I continued. "She said it would be inappropriate for the children present." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sorry about that. I know family weddings are important to you." "They are," I agreed. "But I've realized that I'd rather miss some family events than attend them while hiding who I am. And honestly, the relatives who are accepting have become closer to me than ever before. It's like going through this experience helped us figure out who really prioritizes love over social expectations." We were interrupted by Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, Maya's supervising physician, who approached our table with a clipboard and a tired but pleased expression. "Maya," she said, "I wanted to catch you before you left. I just reviewed your patient evaluations from today, and I have to say, your diagnostic accuracy and bedside manner continue to be exceptional. I'm recommending you for the chief residency track." Maya's face broke into a huge smile. The chief residency was an extremely competitive position that would set her up for the best fellowship opportunities after graduation. "Dr. Chen, thank you so much. I'm honored to be considered." "You've earned it," Dr. Chen replied. Then she turned to me. "Sarah, I hope you know you have an extraordinary partner here. Maya talks about you constantly, how you've revolutionized the cardiac monitoring system, how your engineering improvements have made our jobs easier, how proud she is of your work." I felt myself blushing slightly. "Maya talks about me?" "All the time," Dr. Chen said with a smile. "It's quite sweet, actually. You two are one of those couples that make everyone else believe in love." After Dr. Chen left, Maya and I sat quietly for a moment, both of us processing the day and the conversation. "Maya," I said eventually, "do you ever regret how public we made our relationship that day at my graduation? Do you ever wish we had handled it differently?" Maya considered the question seriously before answering. "I think about it sometimes," she said. "I wonder if there was a gentler way to help your family understand, a way that would have been less shocking or dramatic." She paused, looking out the break room window at the Chicago skyline. "But then, I remember how you looked when your father said no man would ever want you. I remember how you seemed to shrink into yourself, how you started to believe that maybe you really were fundamentally unlovable. And I knew that someone had to speak up. Someone had to show you and everyone else that you are absolutely worthy of love and respect." She reached across the table and took my hand. "So no, I don't regret kissing you in front of your family. I don't regret making it impossible for you to keep hiding. Because look at where we are now. You're doing work you love. Your immediate family has learned to accept and support us. And we're building the kind of partnership that we both deserve." As we left the hospital that evening and walked toward the parking garage, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The fear and anxiety that had dominated my life for years had been replaced by a sense of authenticity and peace that I hadn't known was possible. Yes, some relationships had been damaged or lost, but the relationships that remained had become deeper and more honest than ever before. "Sarah," Maya said as we reached our cars, "there's something I wanted to talk to you about." Something in her tone made me pause. "What is it?" Maya looked nervous in a way I rarely saw, fidgeting with her car keys and avoiding direct eye contact. "I've been thinking about our future," she began, "about what we want to build together, about how we want to formalize our commitment to each other." My heart started beating faster as I realized where this conversation might be heading. "Maya, I know marriage equality isn't legal in Illinois yet," she continued, "but there are states where we could get married, where our relationship would have legal recognition. And I know your family is still adjusting to us being together, so the timing might not be perfect." She finally looked up and met my eyes. "But I love you, Sarah Chen. I love your brilliant mind and your kind heart, and your terrible habit of leaving coffee cups all over my apartment. I love how you stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I love how you've taught your family to be more accepting, and how you've never given up on the people who matter to you." I felt tears starting to form as I realized this conversation was exactly what I thought it was. "I want to marry you," Maya said simply. "I want to build a life together that's completely honest and authentic. I want us to be each other's family in every sense that matters. What do you think?" Standing in that hospital parking garage, 6 months after one of the most difficult days of my life, I thought about everything that had led us to this moment. I thought about my father's hurtful words and Maya's protective kiss. I thought about my mother's growing acceptance and my grandfather's simple wisdom. I thought about Uncle Robert's prejudice and my brother's unwavering support. Most of all, I thought about the woman standing in front of me, this person who had seen me at my most vulnerable and had chosen to love me anyway, who had stood up to my family's disapproval and helped me find the courage to be myself. "Yes," I said, pulling her into my arms. "Yes, I want to marry you too." As Maya kissed me under the fluorescent lights of the parking garage, I realized that sometimes the most important love stories don't start with perfect acceptance from everyone around you. Sometimes they start with one person who believes in your worth so completely that they're willing to fight for your right to be loved openly and honestly. And sometimes that's exactly the kind of love that changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone who witnesses it.